Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa right here on Channels Television. Now, these are not the best of times for former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi. His lawyers have confirmed that he will appeal against a conviction for violence, kidnapping and torture imposed by a court over the killing of protesters. In April, Morsi and 12 other members of the Muslim Brotherhood, including senior figures Mohamed El Beltagi and Essam El Arain, were sentenced to 20 years in prison without parole on the charges. 2 others were jailed for 10 years without parole. Morsi, who was Egypt's first freely elected president, was toppled by the army back in 2013 after mass protests against his rule. Since then, he's faced several legal cases. Now, Al-Qaeda's North Africa branch has denied reports that Algerian militant Mokhtar Belmokhtar, who's a major figure in insurgencies across North Africa and the Saharan border region, was killed in a U.S. airstrike in Libya. The site intelligence group, which monitors radical Islamist organizations in the media, cited a statement from Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb posted on Twitter, declaring that Belmokhtar, also known as Khalid Abu al-Abbas, is alive. Libya's government said on June the 15th that the militant blamed for a deadly attack on an Algerian gas field was dead. Belmokhtar also ran smuggling routes across North Africa, and he was dubbed the Uncatchable by the French military. His death would be a major strike against Al-Qaeda-tied groups in the region. Now to other matters from East Africa. The UK government has lifted its warning against traveling to parts of Kenya's coast, including Mombasa. The Foreign Office previously warned against all but essential travel to almost all of the country's Indian Ocean coastline. Warnings remain in place for parts of the coast and anywhere within 60 kilometers of the border with Somalia due to a high threat from terrorism. Warnings also remain in place for areas including Nairobi's easterly suburb, and according to the Foreign Office, the main threat of terrorism in the warning areas comes from extremists linked to Al-Shabaab. That's a militant group which has carried out attacks in Kenya in response to Kenya's military intervention in Somalia. There have been several attacks in Kenya recently, including the killing of at least 148 people at Garissa University College in April 2015. We're joined by the Voice of America's Vincent McCrory, and he is an expert when it comes to Kenya matters. He joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Vincent, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
It's a pleasure.
Now, what criteria did the UK actually look at when it relaxed this travel ban?
Well, you know, first, the UK has been working very closely with Kenyan authorities in the fight against Al-Shabaab because UK is a traditional ally of Kenya, being a former colonial master. And they have been looking at what Kenya is doing on the ground. In fact, they've been working together. The UK Foreign Secretary, Francis Hammond, said they have been working with the government of Kenya to look into ways in which they can help to fight against this terrorist group. So definitely they've considered the extent to which a country has beefed up security in the concerned areas, but also the things that are put on the ground to ensure that terrorism can be stemmed, or at least can be reduced, especially in areas where British tourists are likely to visit.
Well, Vincent, with this development, would you consider this an acknowledgement of Kenya's military efforts?
Definitely. From the British point of view, they're convinced that Kenya is doing a good job. It may not have necessarily eliminated the possibility of a terrorist attack at any time, but they've been in close talks. And obviously, because they collaborate in collection of intelligence, the Kenyan authorities have been reaching out to the British to help them. The British are close to the government's efforts in fighting the terrorist group. So I think this is a show of confidence in what Kenya is doing to fight terrorism.
Yeah, well, this is one question that has been on my mind for a while, and Vincent. How long can a country actually remain on high alert before some level of normalcy and sanity can be restored?
First you have to differentiate. There's alert and also there's travel warnings. When there is a travel alert, for example, that can be a temporary thing. That could be because there's an election taking place. There is a kind of a temporary situation like the case was in West Africa with the outbreak of Ebola. When that situation goes away, that travel alert is taken away, is lifted. But when you talk about travel warnings, and high alert, it can stay in place for as long as it takes, for as long as the situation takes to resolve. Depending on the review by the country that has issued that warning, it could be months, it could be years, it could be decades. It just all depends on the assessment on the ground and what they think has changed on the ground as far as that particular threat that led to the travel warning being issued.
Well, Vincent, that's as regards traveling. But in Kenya, how long will the government have to be on high alert, especially with the threats made by Al-Shabaab, saying that the Garissa attack was just a drop in the ocean of what was coming?
It has to be on high alert until possibly there are no more attacks for prolonged periods of time. For example, if it was to be the case that for the last 1 year or 2 years there's not been any credible terrorist threat, then possibly they could relax. So again, depending on the situation, it can take a short time, it can take for as long as it takes. It all depends on whether the threat is still present. And the threat is present not because things are happening every day, but if the intelligence being collected indicates that there are possibilities, there are plots, there are plans to attack any particular target in the country, that the country remains on high alert. But the longer it takes for those attacks to happen, the more, the fewer the credible intelligence or reports of possible terrorist attack, then the more likely it is that they will relax the alert and the people go on with their lives as normal.
Oh, Vincent, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us right here on Network Africa. We appreciate your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Vincent McCrory speaking with us from Washington, D.C. Now, a federal jury is scheduled to begin a second day of deliberations in the trial of an Oklahoma man charged with sexually abusing children at a Kenya orphanage. Deliberations are to resume or have resumed today in the trial of the 20-year-old Matthew Lane Durham, and he's pleaded not guilty to 17 counts of sexual misconduct with children, including aggravated sexual abuse and engaging in illicit sexual conduct in foreign places. If convicted, he could face life behind bars. Prosecutors allege Durham targeted orphans while serving as a volunteer at the Upendo Children's Home in Nairobi, Kenya, between April and June 2014. The orphanage cares for neglected children in the East African nation.